What if I told you that Benjamin Netanyahu is not Benjamin Netanyahu, nor is Golda Meir, and nor is Ariel Sharon, Ariel Sharon? Many of Israel's most recognizable leaders were born with completely different names before adopting new Zionist identities. For example, Netanyahu's name was originally Benjamin Mileikowsky. His grandfather, Nathan Mileikowsky, was a rabbi who changed the family name to Netanyahu, meaning God has given. And he's not alone. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's first prime minister, was originally David Grün. He changed his Polish name in 1910 and adopted the surname Ben-Gurion, meaning son of a lion cub. Moshe Sharet, Israel's second prime minister, was born Moshe Chertok in Ukraine. He Hebraized his name in 1949. The infamous Golda Meir was born Goldy Mabovich in Kiev, Ukraine, later became Goldie Meyerson after marriage and officially changed her name to Meir in 1956 when appointed foreign minister. Yitzhak Shamir, also a former prime minister of Israel, was originally born Yitzhak Yazernetsky in Poland. Other prime ministers who Hebraized their names include Ehud Barak, who was born Ehud Brog, but changed his name to Barak, meaning lightning in Hebrew. Ariel Sharon, who was originally Ariel Sharon. And there is Shimon Peres, who was born Shimon Persky in Poland, in addition to Levi Eshkol, who was born Levi Yitzhak Shkulnik near Kiev. Meanwhile, former Israeli Minister of War Moshe Dayan's family was associated with Kitai Gorodsky. This pattern is not restricted to Israeli officials. Gal Gadot's parents Hebraized their surname from Greenstein to Gadot before her birth. This isn't a coincidence. This is a systemic policy. The practice of Hebraization was particularly intensive during the early days of the entity. In 1948 and 1949 alone, 17,000 Israeli settlers changed their original names to Hebrew ones. It was David Ben-Gurion who issued binding orders requiring Hebrew names for state officials and diplomatic representatives abroad. Even a committee for Hebrew names had to be established to supervise implementation. And from 1955, Ben-Gurion mandated that all IOF commanding officers, from squadron commander to chief of staff, must change non-Hebrew surnames to Hebrew ones. Today, approximately 15% of incoming American and British settlers still Hebraize their names upon arrival in occupied Palestine. But why was this transformation so crucial? To understand this better, we need to examine how modern Hebrew itself was created. Hebrew had been essentially dead as a spoken language for nearly 1,700 years, surviving only for religious purposes. The revival began when Eliezer Ben-Yehuda, who arrived in Palestine in 1881 with a radical vision, transforming Hebrew from a sacred language into a living national language. Ben-Yehuda employed multiple strategies to resurrect ancient Hebrew, like reviving dormant biblical words, extracting vocabulary from Talmudic literature, translating concepts directly from German and French. But he also did something remarkable, which is systematic borrowing from Arabic, as both Hebrew and Arabic are Semitic languages, sharing fundamental structural similarities. And Arabic, a living language, had vocabulary for countless modern concepts that ancient Hebrew lacked. However, the creation of modern Hebrew wasn't just a linguistic project. It was the fundamental cornerstone of Zionist ideology. First, Hebrew served as the primary mechanism for transforming Jews from a diasporic religious community into a unified secular nation. Zionism sought to reconfigure Jewish identity from religious to nationalist terms. Traditional Jewish identity had been based on religious observance and Torah study. Zionism needed to replace this with a secular nationalist framework, and Hebrew provided the linguistic foundation for that. Hence, it is no surprise that 60% of Israelis define themselves as non-religious. Second, it unified diverse Jewish populations. Jews in 1880 spoke dozens of different languages: Yiddish, Ladino, Arabic dialects, German, Russian, French, etc. So they needed a common language. Third, it addressed the Yiddish question. The choice of Hebrew over Yiddish was perhaps the most contentious aspect. Yiddish was the mother tongue of most Eastern European Jews and has a rich literary heritage, but Zionists systematically rejected it because it represented everything they sought to escape: diaspora identity, persecution, and exile mentality. As a matter of fact, there were organizations that actively suppressed Yiddish in Palestine. But most importantly, the creation of modern Hebrew invented historical legitimacy for political claims. By reviving ancient Hebrew, Zionists could gloss over millennia of non-Jewish history in Palestine and argue for continuity between the modern movement and ancient Jewish presence in the land. And there's more. Hebraization isn't just settler surnames. It extends to Hebraizing the names of geographic locations, effectively erasing Palestinian presence, representing what scholars term memoricide, the deliberate erasure of a people's historical memory. The scope of Hebraization in Palestine is massive. 2,780 historical locations had their names Hebraized, including 340 villages and towns, 1,000 archaeological sites, 560 rivers and valleys, 380 springs, and 198 mountains and hills. Hebraization took many forms. Some were based on phonetic similarity, like Sur'a becoming Zora and Ajur becoming Agur. Others were allegedly biblical restorations, like Akka becoming Akko and Yafa becoming Yafo. Even though these names were never Hebrew, they were Canaanite. In many other cases, entirely new Hebrew names were created, like Rashrash becoming Eilat, and the ancient Palestinian village of Mlabbis becoming Petah Tikva. More so, their renaming was inextricably linked to physical destruction. Of approximately 400 Palestinian villages ethnically cleansed during 1947 till 1949, many were physically demolished and replaced with Jewish communities adopting Hebrew names. Israeli forests were often planted over village ruins, completing both physical and linguistic erasure. Hebraization is a deliberate effort to rewrite historical and geographical memory, replacing Palestinian names that often preserved ancient Canaanite, Aramic, and pre-Islamic toponyms with Hebrew names supporting Zionist historical narrative. The systematic Hebraization of both personal and place names constituted a comprehensive project of cultural theft and identity transformation, creating not just new names, but a fabricated relationship to land, history, and collective memory.